When you think about the true strength of a Stoic man, it begins with one thing: emotional control. This is the foundation of his presence, the invisible force that makes him stand out without saying a word. Most men lose power not because they lack looks, money, or charm, but because they cannot control their emotions in the face of women. They react too quickly, get too easily offended, or let their neediness drive their actions. But a stoic man is different. He understands that emotions are like wild horses. If you let them run free, they'll drag you into weakness. If you learn to harness them, they'll carry you to power. Think about it. When a woman tests you, when she pulls away, when she says something sharp or tries to provoke a reaction, how you respond in that moment determines everything. The average man gets defensive, angry, or desperate. He texts back paragraphs, he pleads, he tries to convince. But the stoic man doesn't take the bait. He stays calm, centered, and unshaken. His silence, his composure, his refusal to be moved, these become far more powerful than any words he could say. Women are emotional beings. They feel first and think later. They want to know if the man in front of them can handle the storm. Can he hold steady when things get chaotic? Can he maintain his frame when she challenges him? This is not about games, it's about biology and psychology. A woman feels safe and attracted to a man who doesn't crumble under pressure because it signals strength, maturity, and self mastery. When you react emotionally, you show that you're easily swayed. When you stay calm, you show that you are in control, not of her, but of yourself. And that's the kind of control she can't resist. This emotional control also creates a sense of security. Imagine a man who panics every time his partner is upset, who raises his voice the moment he feels challenged, or who becomes cold and withdrawn when he doesn't get his way. That kind of instability pushes people away because it makes them feel unsafe. Now imagine the man who, no matter what is said to him, takes a breath, remains calm, and responds with clarity. He doesn't argue just to win. He doesn't let anger dictate his choices. He listens, he observes, and he chooses his words with care. That man commands respect because his presence is grounding. What most men don't realize is that women often test men to see exactly this: how much emotional control they truly have. She might cancel plans last minute, she might pull back when you show interest, or she might say something to get under your skin. If you chase, complain, or lash out, you prove her suspicion that you're controlled by emotion, not principle. But if you stay calm and unfazed, you confuse her because she realizes she can't shake you. That confusion slowly turns into curiosity, then curiosity becomes attraction. A stoic man gains power because he understands that his emotions are his responsibility. He doesn't give anyone the keys to his inner peace. He doesn't hand over control of his mood to another person's actions. And when a woman sees this, she knows she's dealing with someone rare, someone she can respect, someone she can admire, someone who stands firm no matter what. Because in the end, the man who controls his emotions doesn't just control the dynamic with women, he controls his life. There is a kind of power in silence that most men underestimate. In a world where everyone is rushing to respond, eager to prove themselves, desperate to fill every gap with words, the Stoic man understands the value of patience. He knows that silence is not weakness, it is strength. Patience is not passivity, it is mastery. When you refuse to rush, when you choose not to chase, when you let the space between you and her breathe, you create an energy that pulls her in far stronger than chasing ever could. Think about what happens when a man rushes into every interaction with urgency. He texts immediately, he double messages, he tries to fill the silence because he cannot sit with it. What does that communicate? It tells her he has no self control, that her presence is the center of his world, that he cannot handle not being acknowledged. But the stoic man flips this dynamic entirely. When she pulls back, he doesn't panic. When she takes her time to respond, he doesn't start sending question marks or needy lines. He understands that silence is not his enemy, it is his ally. When you can sit in silence and not be disturbed by it, you are showing her something that very few men do. You are showing her that you are complete without her validation. And this is where the real power begins. Because when a woman feels that you are not running after her, that you can sit back patiently without breaking your frame, she begins to feel an unusual energy, an attraction born not from your words, but from your restraint. She starts to wonder, why isn't he reacting? Why isn't he chasing? Why does he seem so calm while others would be begging for my attention? That wonder leads to curiosity, and curiosity is the spark that ignites pursuit. Patience also teaches her something about your value. A man who can wait, a man who does not need instant gratification, is a man who has self control. And self control is one of the highest forms of power. Because if you can control your need for attention, you can control your need for approval, for validation, for reassurance. That makes you unshakable. And in relationships, women instinctively respect men who cannot be easily moved. The more patient you are, the more she feels she has to earn your attention instead of you scrambling to earn hers. The Stoic man knows that silence creates space for desire to grow. Just like oxygen fuels fire, distance fuels attraction. By not rushing, by not chasing, by not trying to close the gap too quickly, you give her time to feel your absence. And in that absence, she begins to realize what you bring to her life. She remembers the calm you gave her, the steadiness you radiated, the strength of your presence. That reflection makes her want to reach out, to re engage, to invest. But if you're always filling the silence, she never gets the chance to feel that pull. Patience is also a test of your discipline. Any man can talk, any man can send messages, any man can chase, but not every man can wait. Not every man can sit in silence and trust his value. The Stoic man understands that by doing less, he actually does more. His restraint becomes irresistible. His patience becomes the hook that keeps her thinking about him when he's not around. And his silence speaks louder than words ever could. Because in the end, the man who understands the power of silence and patience never has to chase. He simply waits and she eventually comes closer. Confidence is not about puffing out your chest, bragging about your achievements, or forcing people to notice you. True confidence is quiet, subtle, and deeply rooted in self respect. A Stoic man doesn't need to tell anyone he is valuable. His actions, his presence, and his self assurance communicate it without a word. And when it comes to women, nothing is more magnetic than a man who radiates this kind of inner confidence. It's not the loudness that draws her in, it's the calm certainty that he knows who he is and doesn't need anyone's approval to feel complete. Most men lose power in relationships because they look to women to validate them. They dress a certain way to impress her. They exaggerate their accomplishments to win her approval, or they constantly fish for compliments to feel secure. But the Stoic man flips this dynamic on its head. He doesn't try to convince her of his worth. He lives in such a way that she sees it naturally. His focus is not on getting her attention, but on living his mission, pursuing his goals, and staying aligned with his values. That groundedness is what communicates to her that he is confident without him needing to say a single thing. There is also something deeply attractive about a man who does not crumble under pressure or competition. Women often test men not to be cruel, but to see if his confidence is real or fragile. She might challenge his opinion, question his choices, or even show interest in another man just to see how he reacts. The man who panics, gets jealous, or feels threatened shows her that his confidence was only a mask. But the Stoic man, he doesn't flinch. He doesn't see another man as competition because he knows no one else can replace him. He doesn't beg for validation when questioned because he's rooted in his principles. He doesn't react with jealousy because he trusts his value. That calm certainty is what confuses her. It makes her wonder why he isn't scrambling like everyone else. This quiet confidence also communicates leadership. A Stoic man is not loud, but he sets the tone in any room he enters. His energy is composed, not scattered. He speaks when he has something to say, not just to fill the silence. He doesn't chase approval, but instead creates an environment where people naturally respect him. Women are drawn to this because deep down they crave stability and strength. A man who doesn't need their constant validation makes them feel both challenged and secure at the same time. Another layer to this is that women are highly intuitive. They can sense when a man's confidence is real and when it's an act. The man who pretends to be strong will eventually crack under pressure. But the man who has built himself through discipline, self respect, and mastery over his emotions, his confidence doesn't waver. He doesn't brag about his value because he knows it's already visible. He doesn't have to convince anyone, his life speaks for itself. That's why Stoic men don't need to chase women. Women chase them because their quiet confidence makes them rare. Confidence without arrogance, strength without noise, presence without desperation, that is what makes a Stoic man powerful. When you carry yourself this way, women feel it deeply. They don't just see you, they respect you, they admire you, and they are drawn to you without you having to lift a finger. Because in the end, when a man exudes quiet confidence, He doesn't chase power over women, he naturally attracts it. A stoic man understands that emotions are powerful, but he also knows that giving them unchecked control can destroy his presence, his influence, and his relationships. Most men make the mistake of reacting too quickly, especially when they feel hurt, rejected, or disrespected. They raise their voices, argue endlessly, or try to prove their point out of frustration. But what they don't realize is that every time they lose control of their emotions, they lose power. A woman watches closely how a man responds when tested, when pushed, when challenged. And in those moments, it's not the words that matter most, it's his ability to stay calm, centered, and unshaken. When you can control your emotions, you communicate strength without even trying. Think about it, anyone can get angry, anyone can lash out or send a long emotional message. That's easy, but not everyone can pause, breathe, and respond with clarity. That takes discipline. That takes inner strength. And that is what sets a stoic man apart. A woman expects men to crumble under emotional pressure. When you don't, you stand out in her eyes as someone rare, someone strong, someone she cannot easily manipulate or destabilize. This doesn't mean suppressing your emotions or pretending you don't feel. Quite the opposite. Stoicism teaches you to acknowledge your emotions, but not be ruled by them. When you feel jealousy, you don't act on it. When you feel anger, you don't explode. When you feel fear, you don't run. Instead, you let those emotions flow through you, but you remain in control of your actions. This is where true power lies. A man who reacts impulsively gives away his power to circumstances. A man who responds deliberately maintains command over himself and, by extension, over the dynamic with others, including women. Women are naturally drawn to emotional strength. They want to know that the man they're with won't collapse under life's pressure, won't become unstable when things go wrong, and won't crumble when tested. This is why many women will push boundaries. They want to see if your confidence is real or just a facade. If she pulls back, if she goes cold, if she says something designed to sting, she's often testing to see whether you can hold your frame. The man who reacts emotionally validates her doubts. The man who stays calm, steady, and unbothered earns her deepest respect. And here's the paradox: when you stop reacting emotionally, you actually confuse her. She expects drama, she expects resistance, she expects begging or anger, but when you give her none of that, when you remain stoic, she starts to feel unsettled in a way that pulls her back toward you. Your emotional discipline shifts the dynamic. Instead of her controlling you with her actions, she realizes she cannot move you so easily. That realization makes her respect you even more and often desire you more deeply. Emotional control also allows you to make better choices in the heat of the moment. Instead of saying something you'll regret, you stay composed. Instead of sending 10 messages out of desperation, you send none. Instead of chasing her for reassurance, you let the silence work in your favor. Each of these choices reinforces your power because they show you are not controlled by emotion, you are guided by reason. A stoic man knows that emotions are natural, but he refuses to let them dictate his behavior. By mastering this one skill, he separates himself from most men. Because while others lose their balance at the first sign of turbulence, he remains grounded, calm, and in control. And that emotional control is what makes him truly powerful in the eyes of any woman. One of the most misunderstood aspects of attraction is the role of silence in space. Most men, when they feel a woman pulling away, rush in to close the gap. They call more, text more, plead for answers, or try to convince her to stay interested. What they don't realize is that this constant chasing only pushes her further away. The stoic man operates differently. He understands the power of doing less, of giving space, of allowing silence to work in his favor. He doesn't fear distance because he knows that if a connection is real, it doesn't need to be forced. Instead of smothering her with attention, he pulls back and lets her feel the weight of his absence. Why is this so effective? Because space creates curiosity. When you stop filling every moment with your words, your presence becomes something she starts to notice missing. Most men make themselves too available, and in doing so, they lose their value. A woman cannot miss a man who never gives her the chance to. But when you step back, when you become less predictable, when you let her wonder what you're doing and who you're with, her mind starts working in your favor. That silence, that absence, that mystery, it's more powerful than anything you could say. A stoic man doesn't rush to resolve every silence because he knows that emotions grow in empty spaces. A woman who doesn't hear from you starts to think. She replays conversations, she questions her decisions, she compares you to other men who might be too eager, too available, too desperate. In contrast, your composure and your willingness to let silence breathe makes her wonder, why isn't he chasing me like everyone else? That question alone shifts the dynamic. Suddenly, she's thinking about you, not because you forced yourself into her mind, but because you gave her the space to invite you in. This doesn't mean playing games or manipulating. It's about understanding human psychology. People value what is not easily available. They desire what feels scarce. By not flooding her with attention, you position yourself as a man with a life, with purpose, with boundaries. You show her that your world doesn't revolve around her, and that if she wants your time, she has to step into it rather than having it handed to her endlessly. That subtle shift transforms how she sees you from just another man seeking her validation to a man who already validates himself. The beauty of silence in space is that it also gives you clarity. When you're not constantly reacting, you have the opportunity to step back and observe the situation. Is she truly interested, or was she only enjoying the chase? Is her pullback temporary, or does it reveal her real priorities? By not over-investing, you give yourself the chance to see the truth. And that awareness keeps you in control of your choices rather than becoming enslaved to your emotions. And here's the part that confuses women the most. When you don't rush to fill the silence, when you don't try to chase her down or force her attention, she begins to realize that she might be the one who needs to pursue you. That reversal of roles is powerful. It makes her question her own feelings, her own behavior, and it draws her back in ways that begging or chasing never could. The Stoic man doesn't fear silence, he uses it as a tool. He doesn't avoid space, he embraces it as a test of strength because he knows that what is truly his will come to him and he never needs to force it. And that is why silence and space, when mastered, become one of the most powerful forms of influence a man can have over a woman. The final key to understanding how Stoic men gain power without chasing lies in their ability to embody long term consistency and discipline. Many men can act strong for a day, a week, or even a month. They can put on a front of confidence, remain calm for a short period, or play it cool while secretly waiting for a reaction. But women are far more perceptive than most men realize. They can tell when behavior is an act, when the calmness is just a mask, and when the composure is temporary. What truly sets the Stoic man apart is his unwavering ability to live his values day after day, regardless of whether anyone is watching, regardless of whether he's being tested, and regardless of whether he's receiving validation. Consistency is what turns respect into admiration. Any man can say he won't chase, but only the disciplined man can live that truth even when temptation arises. When she pulls away, he doesn't break. When she tests him, he doesn't fold. When she throws emotional storms his way, he doesn't get swept up in them. That ability to remain consistent communicates that his strength is real, not situational. And that steadiness is what makes women feel secure around him, even if they can't always articulate why. Discipline is also magnetic because it shows that a man isn't controlled by his impulses. While most people jump at instant gratification, the Stoic man demonstrates patience. He doesn't need immediate approval, immediate responses, or immediate rewards. He invests in his growth, his goals, and his vision, knowing that the results will come in time. That patience itself becomes attractive because it sets him apart from the restless, needy energy most women encounter daily. A man who isn't desperate for instant acknowledgement feels like a mountain, solid, immovable, and enduring. It's also important to realize that consistency and discipline aren't just about how you treat her, they're about how you treat yourself. If you tell yourself you're going to wake up early and you do it, that builds self respect. If you promise yourself you won't send that impulsive text and you keep that promise, that builds inner strength. Every small act of discipline compounds into a presence that radiates calm authority. Women feel this on a deep level, often without even knowing why they are so drawn to it. They can sense the man who is grounded in his own principles and the man who is swayed by every emotion or external pressure. Over time, consistency proves everything. A man might impress her with words or gestures in the short term, but what leaves a lasting mark is whether his actions align with his principles repeatedly. Does he always carry himself with respect? Does he always remain composed in difficult situations? Does he always treat his mission as more important than chasing temporary validation? When the answer is yes, his value doesn't just increase, it becomes undeniable. And here's the paradox. When a man truly embodies consistency and discipline, he no longer even thinks about power over women. Power isn't something he seeks, it's something that naturally flows toward him because people, including women, are drawn to stability, strength, and grounded energy. He doesn't need to convince anyone of his worth because his life itself becomes the evidence. This is why the Stoic man never has to chase. He knows that his consistency and discipline create a magnetic force. They build trust, respect, and attraction without effort. Because when you are a man who stands firm in who you are every single day, the world and women can't help but take notice. And that is why discipline and consistency make a stoic man unstoppable.